You have heard, I'll bet, I certainly have heard, about painful experiences that people go through. Two of the most painful physical experiences people have are these: the passing of a kidney stone and giving birth to a child. Two incredibly painful experiences, as some of you know. If you pass a kidney stone, at the end of it all that pain, what do you have? A kidney stone, and nothing has changed. At the end of childbirth, all that pain, what do you have? A new life, and everything has changed. Our nation has been in incredible, gut-wrenching pain for these past 2 weeks since the lynching of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The pain is incessant. It is extreme. And the question before us is it a kidney stone moment, and after these protests die down, we're just going to go back to the old way? Or is this a childbirth moment? Is God bringing something new to life that will change the world in which we live? I pray it's the latter, and that is the hope that sustains me. We had a beautiful reading from the book of Romans. Paul, writing in the 8th chapter of Romans, talks about this experience of childbirth and the pain that it causes. He writes this, chapter 8, verse 21. We live in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay, and we will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. Beautiful words. Paul saying the pain that he was going through and his people were going through were labor pains. God was bringing something new to life. And I believe that's what we're going through now. The pain that we are going through is all related to the sin of racism. It is a sin as offensive and deadly as any other sin that we know. I want to just reflect a little bit on different forms of racism. Let me just put three types before you. The first is the type that we all share. It might be our attitudes. It might be subtle. It might be under the radar. It might be things that we're not really even aware that we're doing. It's things like saying, I'm not racist. I am not the beneficiary of white privilege. I've earned everything I have. I have black friends. Do you live in this neighborhood? I haven't seen you before, and we don't have any black people here. Maybe I'll call the cops. Did you get admitted to this college because of your grades or because of your color? These microaggressions are forms of racism that all of us who are white-skinned participate in. We might not like admitting it or acknowledging it, but all of us participate in a variety of forms, subtle or not so subtle, of racism. We're called to name them and turn away from them. But that's only one type of racism. There's another one which is systemic. It's built into the society in which we live in. It consistently deprives people with black skin of the benefits that people with white skin get. We see it in housing. We see it in health care. We see it in education. We see it in a variety of forms. We also see it in acts of violence committed by some white people against other people of black skin. We might not participate in these directly. We might not support them. We might not need to personally repent of them, but God does call us to eradicate them. This form of racism in its most violent expression is characterized in the reading that we heard just a little bit earlier called Strange Fruit. Abel Meeropol saw a photo of a lynching from Marion, Indiana, 2 black men suspended from a tree. And he was sickened, nauseated, and outraged. And so he wrote these words: Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black body swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruits hanging from the poplar trees. It has been called one of the songs that changed the world when Billie Holiday sang it. Time magazine called it the greatest song of the 20th century, Strange Fruit. We saw it in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery just a few weeks ago by some white citizens who didn't want a black man in their neighborhood. We saw it in the murder of Trayvon Martin just a few years ago. And we see it in many places where white citizens think black citizens are of less value. Their lives don't matter. There's a different kind of racism related to these others, which is the racism of police in their treatment of people with black skin. We've seen it in the lynchings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, and countless others. It's been with us for 400 years, ever since the first Africans were brought to this country. We've seen it in Laquan McDonald. It is incredibly destructive. And our marches and our demonstrations and our protests and our signs, although they are about all those forms of racism, are specifically about this one, the issue of police brutality, police mistreatment of people with black skin. This is controversial stuff. Some of you are already maybe ready to shut the TV off or turn to some happy preacher on TV. But I hope you'll stay with me and we can wrestle with this together. Some folks will say this issue of police murdering black people is a few bad apples. Most of the police are fine and there's only a few of them, and if we just get rid of them, it would all be better. Tragically, this is not true. In the city of Chicago, every year, there are numerous lawsuits filed against police officers for brutality, most of them against black citizens. Year 2011, you know how much the city paid out of your tax dollars for police misconduct? $55 million. Year 2013, $95 million. You think, it's getting better though, right? It's going to get better. 2018, $113 million. The city paid out so they wouldn't have to go to court, settled outside, saying, okay, you were treated with misconduct and brutality, and you deserve a payment. It is widespread. It is throughout our police department. The Department of Justice, after the Laquan McDonald murder, came in, examined our police department, and left a series of recommendations. You can read all about it online, Department of Justice Consent Decree from 2017. They said CPD engages in a consistent pattern of unconstitutional use of force. It is deficient in accountability systems that contribute to the pattern of unconstitutional conduct. It has policies that intentionally impede investigators of misconduct. Derek Chauvin, the man who murdered George Floyd, as you probably know, had 18 different counts of complaints against him, and yet the police department couldn't get rid of him. They kept him. Consent decree says the CPD does not provide officers with sufficient direction, supervision, or support to ensure lawful policy. The cost of misconduct, poor training, and a complete lack of accountability is devastating. The loss of lives, the loss of health, the loss of trust, and the incredible loss of funds. I know some good police officers. You do too. We're not picking on individual police officers. What we're saying is the system itself needs reform. It is for this reason that Colin Kaepernick would kneel during the national anthem, as would some of his fellow athletes. And now the question is before us, maybe we need to start kneeling too. You sit during the national anthem, that's a sign of disrespect. If you kneel, it's a sign of respect under protest. Kneeling. I protest police violence towards black people. These are important things to wrestle with, and they're uncomfortable. And we wish we could just write them off as a few bad apples, but it's more than that. And so we live in an era where we are challenged, and I think by our faith, not just by politics, but by our faith, to say, this day, Black lives matter. Now that's biblical. Back in Jesus' time, he went out of his way to say, poor people matter. He went out of his way to show that marginalized people matter. He gave a great teaching about sheep. He said, lost sheep matter. He highlighted those who were most of concern, most in danger, most vulnerable. And he said, those lives matter. And if we lived in 1940 Germany, we would be called by our faith to say, Jewish lives matter. Today in 2020, we are called in our country to say, Black lives matter. Because consistently throughout our society and the way they're treated, it seems like they don't. I hope you can say it with me. I hope you'll believe, I hope you'll understand it's not a bias against everyone else. It's just doing what Jesus did, picking out that group of people most vulnerable, most beaten, most violated, and saying, we stand with you, your life matters. There are a lot of reforms that need to happen, and so we are challenged as a part of repenting, not just to feel bad, and not even just to march, but to be calling our mayor, calling our aldermen, going to meetings, writing letters, and saying, these are some of the changes that need to happen. Our officers need better training on the use of force. They need better accountability. We need to defund much of the police department. Almost $2 billion a year we spend for the police department. Can you imagine what we could do with those resources if they were used in more preventative measures, mental health, daycare, preschool, after school, summer jobs? How many people we could keep out of getting into trouble with the law if those funds were redirected? We need to get the police out of the public schools so we can end what's come to be known as the school-to-prison pipeline. Kids are criminalized for what otherwise, in earlier times, would simply have been handled as disciplinary issues. There's a lot of things specifically we need to work on. And I want to invite you to join with me and others at church in developing our anti-racism ministries to make sure we're doing everything we can. If you're interested, you let me know. We must speak up. at this time. We cannot be silent. The great Lutheran theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer is attributed this quote. It's a little questionable whether he said it, but he certainly would have agreed with it. The quote goes like this: "Silence in the face of evil is itself evil." God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. We cannot be on the sidelines on this. Our silence only supports oppression and suffering. So this is a day for us to figure out how to speak up, not for law and order. Jesus was not a big law and order guy. He broke the law. He disrupted the order. He wasn't a law and order kind of guy. Jesus was one who would speak up on behalf of victims and calls us also to demand justice for victims, to work to reform this whole corrupt system. It's time, my friends, to take sides. We cannot be on a fence. Will you take the side of law and order and look at those looters? Aren't they the problem? Will you be on the side of the status quo and blaming a few bad apples, but nothing really needs to change? Will you be on the side of silence? Or will you choose to be on the side of those who are victims, those who are suffering, those who have been lynched, and help give birth to this new thing God is trying to bring about, and overcoming the sin of racism in our midst, especially these days within our police force? Which side are you on? You gotta choose. You gotta choose.